Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into quite a powerful personal story that one of you shared with us.
Yeah, it's a really unvarnished account.
It is. It covers how infidelity just shattered a family and, well, the incredibly difficult path taken afterwards to try and rebuild a life.
Exactly. We're looking at a written firsthand narrative here, and it gives us this raw look at a very complex and painful human experience. And our goal isn't really to judge, right? It's more to understand what actually happened, the driving forces behind the actions, the consequences that played out, and maybe most importantly, what we can learn from this very personal journey.
Right. And this deep dive is really for you, the listener, who wants to get the heart of this story, understand its complexities, but maybe without getting totally bogged down. We're aiming to unpack the key moments and their impact.
Yeah, our mission, if you like, is to trace the sequence of events, try to grasp the motivations, see the fallout, and pull out the lessons the author herself presents.
Okay, so let's get into it. The author, she starts by describing what sounds like, a pretty happy family life. She's 40, married 7 years to a 45-year-old software engineer at Google. They have a 5-year-old son.
Seems pretty idyllic on the surface.
It does, but things started to change after her husband got a promotion.
Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? How something positive like a promotion can introduce these unexpected stresses. The author notes his work hours increased a lot,
Right.
which led to fatigue and, crucially, a real drop in intimacy. This feeling of neglect, it becomes a sort of recurring theme, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows how, shifts in one person's job can kind of unintentionally shake the emotional foundations of the marriage.
Absolutely. And this feeling neglected, it seems like a key turning point. Then the focus shifts a bit to her own work life. There's this pressure to land a major client. Jay, who's 48, owns a fintech company. Her own career, her promotion, basically depended on this deal.
Wow, so pressure on both sides, professionally, kind of creating distance, maybe.
Seems like it. It really highlights how tangled our personal and professional lives can get.
Yeah.
Her boss even told her, be friendly with Jay, build trust for the deal.
Blurring lines a bit there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that becomes important later. At the same time, she's feeling increasingly unsupported at home. She mentions her husband just wasn't interested. She felt rejected. And then their son goes off to summer camp. So the house, which might have been a space for them to reconnect maybe, just becomes lonely,
Yeah.
passionless. The son's absence seems to just make that existing emotional gap feel even bigger.
Right. And into the sort of vacuum steps Jay. Work meetings get more frequent. She notices him flirting a bit subtly. Initially, she says she ignored it. But then there's this lunch meeting that becomes a kind of turning point.
But what's really striking here is how honest she is about appreciating Jay's attention. She directly links feeling, seen by him to her husband's neglect and how it was hitting her self-esteem.
Yeah.
It shows that dynamic, doesn't it? When your needs aren't met in your main relationship, you can become more, vulnerable to attention from outside, even if it starts small.
Makes you wonder, if they'd talked about the neglect earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What might have changed? So soon after, these non-work outings with Jay start up. Kind of a welcome escape for her,
Yeah, a distraction.
She admits she's starting to feel attracted to him. But at first, she just wants to keep it as that, just a distraction. Meanwhile, her husband gets even more distant. She uses that phrase, treating home like a hotel.
Oof. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? The disconnection she must have felt.
It's incredibly telling. It says so much about the lack of emotional investment she was feeling in the marriage. It wasn't just him being physically absent. It was like he wasn't engaged in their life together.
Yeah.
And that growing gap probably made Jay's attention seem even more appealing,
And then comes the first physical boundary crossing. She initiates contact during a lunch, and then one night she says, driven by all this frustration and neglect, they sleep together at his place.
Feels like a dam breaking, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it likely wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing in isolation. It was probably the culmination of all those unmet needs, the validation from Jay, the distance from her husband. Her saying it was frustration really underlines how unmet her needs felt.
Yeah, it shows how that lack of connection can just create an opening, right?
Absolutely.
The immediate aftermath, though, is intense guilt. She gets home, sees missed calls from her husband, lies about where she was, and right then, she decides she has to end it with Jay, especially because the work contract was nearly done. It's interesting how the professional and personal timelines seem linked there.
It does suggest she was trying to compartmentalize, maybe? Trying to regain some control, limit the damage, perhaps? Thinking, okay, the work reason for seeing him is ending, so the personal side can end too.
Makes sense.
But, as we see pretty quickly, emotional ties aren't usually that easy to cut.
No, definitely not. Jay waits for her after work, tells her he missed her, kind of dismisses her attempt to break it off, says it was a mistake.
Undermining her resolve there.
Totally. And they end up being intimate again, this time in his car. Seems like that emotional pull was just too strong for her initial decision.
It really highlights the complexity, doesn't it? How hard it is to walk away when needs are being met, even if it's, misguided. His pursuit, plus her ongoing feelings of neglect.
Yeah.
It just broke down her decision to stop.
Yeah.
It's that power of immediate feeling versus thinking about the long-term consequences.
Right. So from that point, the affair continues. It actually escalates. They start arranging these discreet meetings, fitting them in around work, around her family life. She talks about the excitement, the thrill of the secrecy.
Yeah, and that secrecy itself can create this really powerful, even if it's artificial, kind of bond. The thrill of the forbidden, meeting in public places, cars, it contrasts so sharply with the lack of passion she felt at home. Probably made the affair seem even more alluring.
A stark contrast.
It really is. Shows how novelty and excitement can, at least temporarily, overshadow the deeper problems in the main relationship.
And this new dynamic makes her more aware, she says, of what she felt was missing in her marriage. Even when her son comes back from camp, she finds ways to keep seeing Jay.
Which must have added this huge layer of complexity, right? The juggling act.
Oh, absolutely. The stress of that, keeping those two worlds separate.
Yeah, it underlines the increasing deception involved. Her focus shifts to managing these two realities. You have to think about the emotional toll, the logistical nightmare of that double life.
And the risk of getting caught just goes up and up.
Exactly. And she starts to rationalize it, taking it one day at a time, which Jay apparently suggested, contrasting his, reassuring words with her husband's continued emotional distance, that one day at a time thinking. It feels like a way to just avoid looking at the bigger picture, doesn't it?
Totally. Avoid the moral implications, the practical mess it could become.
It's a pretty common psychological thing in these situations, that kind of rationalization. Focus on the now, the immediate emotional support from the affair partner.
Yeah.
And you can temporarily kind of block out the huge ethical issues and consequences.
And the fact that her husband seems so distant probably made it easier to justify in her own head.
Very likely. Her emotional investment in the marriage keeps dropping. She even says she felt like her husband either didn't notice or just didn't care.
Wow.
She thinks about separation, but decides against it. Why? To their son.
Right.
She recognizes he's a good father, even if she sees him as a poor husband. Plus, the thought of disrupting her son's life, dealing with shared custody, that weighed really heavily on her.
That's a huge conflict, isn't it? Her own unhappiness versus being a parent.
It's massive. Her choice to stay in what felt like a loveless marriage for her son's sake. It just highlights how much children factor into these incredibly tough decisions. And it shows that the complexity, you can be a good parent, but maybe not a great partner, or vice versa.
Yeah. Okay, so then comes the discovery. And it's triggered by something completely mundane. A dropped phone.
Is it always something small sometimes?
Right. She's on her way to meet Jay, drops her phone, breaks it. Instead of getting it fixed right away, she decides to just go to his place anyway. Just a random event that sets everything off.
Exactly. A chance occurrence, and the carefully built walls of secrecy just start to crumble.
So she gets home later and gets this devastating news. Her son is in the hospital, high fever, and her husband is there with him. The school couldn't reach her because her phone was broken, so they called him. The guilt she must have felt.
Oh, overwhelming, surely. The author makes that connection immediately. Her broken phone, a direct result of her choice to go see Jay, meant she wasn't there for her sick child. It's such a stark contrast between the affair and her role as a mother.
A brutal illustration of the risks.
Yeah. And interestingly, her husband at the hospital, he's calm, doesn't question her much.
Which must have seemed strange, maybe, or maybe a relief at first.
Possibly. But later that night, the confrontation happens. He tells her he knew.
Knew about the affair.
Everything. He'd called her office when he couldn't reach her, found out she wasn't there. He'd actually seen her with Jay. He had pictures.
Wow. Pictures. So his silence at the hospital
takes on a whole new, chilling meaning, right? He wasn't oblivious. He was observing, gathering proof.
Well,
a very calculated approach, it seems, rather than an immediate emotional blow-up.
No room for denial, then.
None. She confesses, tries to explain about feeling neglected,
Yeah.
and his response. He talks about how hard he'd been working, reveals he'd been planning a big family trip for them.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It really is. And then he drops the bomb. He says he'd never cheated on her. And then he presents her with divorce papers, demands full custody of their son.
Full custody, just like that. The difference in their perspectives on the marriage is just stark.
Totally stark. His revealing his plans, his efforts, it adds this layer of tragedy. It highlights how much miscommunication or just differing views there can be in a marriage. What she felt as neglect, maybe he saw as working hard for the family.
Yeah.
And demanding full custody. That's such a powerful, devastating consequence. Shows how deep that hurt and anger must have been.
And then he uses their son as leverage, says he'll tell the boy the truth about the affair unless she signs the papers, agrees to custody, and ends things with Jay immediately.
That's an incredibly difficult position to put someone in.
Horrific. Faced with that choice, potentially damaging her son by fighting or losing him day to day, she chooses to protect him. She signs the papers, agrees to its terms, ends the affair with Jay. It's like the ultimate parental sacrifice, in a way.
It really underscores the immense consequences, doesn't it? How infidelity impacts way more than just the couple. The child's well-being becomes the absolute bottom line for her. Her decision to prioritize that, even giving up her daily life with him, is just a massive, heartbreaking moment in the story.
The aftermath sounds just brutal. The divorce goes through quickly because she doesn't contest anything. She moves into a company apartment. Contact with her son is severely limited. She talks about the deep pain of missing him.
Gut-wrenching.
But there's also this, bittersweet realization. Her ex-husband is now apparently much more present and engaged as a father than he was when they were married. The irony there.
It's a really poignant paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
The very thing that might have contributed to the breakdown his work focus seems to shift afterwards, making him a more involved dad. It just shows how major life changes can have these unexpected ripple effects, positive in one area, devastating loss in another.
Yeah. And she says there's no more contact with Jay. She's just left with this profound regret, the endless what-ifs. She even waived any claim to their marital assets in the divorce.
Giving up everything, essentially.
Seems like it. Then, another painful twist. She learns from her son, just matter-of-factly, that the nanny, Bet, was seen leaving his dad's room one morning.
Oh, wow. That must have been incredibly difficult to hear,
Yeah.
especially given her own situation.
Right, it adds this whole other layer of complexity and pain. While she's dealing with the fallout of her actions, learning about her ex-husband and the nanny, it raises so many questions about what was happening after she left.
Another dimension of betrayal, maybe, or just messy human behavior all around. A reminder that these situations are rarely simple.
No. But despite having this information, which she could potentially use, she decides not to. Again, for her son's sake. She doesn't want to hurt her ex-husband in a way that would affect their child.
That shows incredible restraint, doesn't it? Consistently putting her son first, even when she herself is hurting or maybe feeling wronged again.
Yeah. She cherishes her weekend visits with him, but then about a year later, her ex-husband gets engaged to the nanny, Bet.
Engaged to the nanny.
Yeah, and seeing them together, especially in their old family home, she interprets it partly as a form of revenge against her. That must have felt like a final, very painful kind of closure.
You can understand why she might feel that way.
Yeah.
It adds this final, really poignant layer to the whole narrative. Her feeling it was revenge speaks volumes about the deep wounds, the resentment that can linger long after infidelity. Seeing them in that specific place, their former home, yeah, that would likely amplify all those feelings of loss, the finality of it all.
The author ends her story by thanking people who supported her without judging. So looking back at this whole detailed personal account, what are the really key takeaways that stand out for you?
Well, first and foremost, it just powerfully illustrates the truly devastating consequences infidelity can have. It impacts everyone, the couple obviously, but maybe most profoundly the children involved. It also lays bare the intricate complexities of marital dissatisfaction, the unmet needs, the feelings of neglect that can unfortunately create a path towards these destructive choices. And it shows the incredibly painful decisions people face when those lines get crossed.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think it really underscores the long-lasting, far-reaching impact of betrayal. The way she details the progression from the initial feelings to the final outcome is just a very stark, intimate look at how these things can unfold and the damage they cause.
Yeah, it's a tough read or listen in many ways, but this personal story, it serves as such a potent reminder, doesn't it, of the ripple effects our choices have, especially in our closest relationships.
Absolutely.
It really makes you think about the importance of communication, like really talking and listening, addressing those unmet needs within the partnership, and fundamentally the priority of protecting loved ones, especially kids, even when you're going through your own intense personal stuff.
Yeah, that intricate web of emotions, motivations, consequences, it's all there.
It is, and this account, it leaves us with a pretty significant question, kind of echoing the author's own reflections at the end, doesn't it?
It does. She essentially asks, have you ever made a mistake that just fundamentally changed your life's course? And how did you navigate dealing with those consequences?
It's a heavy question. It makes you consider the unseen struggles, the private regrets that people around us might be carrying, beneath the surface. Makes you think.